Hello, my name is Bill Costantino. I would like to introduce you to the ancient Aramaic process of forgiveness, as outlined by Dr. Michael Ryce in his book, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? Dr. Ryce usually presents this material over the course of a full 9-day intensive training. Our goal here is to introduce the model for this powerful process in under 30 minutes. So, let's get underway. When Michael explains the forgiveness process during his 9-day intensive, his whiteboard often looks a bit busy, and this is after having erased it 3 times earlier. The process is not intuitively obvious. Often it takes repeated exposure to really understand. So our goal here is to explain it in simple, understandable, step-by-step way that you can review and study as often as you wish. So let's begin with a question. Have you ever done something you regretted? And if so, what were you feeling at the time? Here are some common responses to that question. As you can see, all of these are some form of hostility or fear. When we are in any form of hostility or fear, we often are likely to say or do something that we'll regret later. Now, I'd like you to remember if you've ever held a newborn baby. In one word, how would you describe the essence of a newborn? Answers to this question always come back with something similar to this list: pure, beautiful, love, magnificent, precious, etc. This is the essence of our true being, love. This is the pure and unchanging essence of who we really are. Very simply, we can be in either one state or the other. We are either connected to our essence as a loving being, or we are caught in some form of hostility and fear. Now, let's take a look at another important piece: how it works for a human with a 9-bit mind. Harvard research has shown, in a time frame when 10,000 brain cells are firing, only 7 bits, plus or minus 2, are in conscious awareness. So our minds have a very limited capacity to hold information. We live in a world, though, loaded with information. We are receiving a constant stream of information from the world of actuality around us. Huge quantities of data from the actuality impinge on our senses. 99.9% is filtered out. My 9-bit mind uses a tiny amount of data to create a representation of the actuality in my mind. This is my personal reality. Under the best of conditions, my reality is still only a representation based on a tiny fraction of input. This is why when you are in a crowded cafeteria, you are able to clearly focus on the conversation you're having with a friend and not even hear all the other noise around you. It gets even more interesting. In addition to our 9-bit conscious mind, we also have a subconscious and unconscious. The conscious mind holds information that we are currently aware of, whatever is in my current focus. The subconscious contains all the information that I can readily remember, such as the color of my house, what we had for breakfast, my parents' names. The unconscious, however, also holds considerable information, but we are not aware of it, nor can we access it by memory. These might include traumatic experiences you had as a child. For example, when you were hit by a parent, abused by a family member, had a physical accident, or emotional abuse. These memories and impressions lie below the veil. The veil represents the limits of our awareness. Beneath the veil is what we hide away from ourselves because it was too painful or traumatic to deal with at the time. When we receive input from the actuality, it stimulates or resonates content from our subconscious and unconscious minds. This input contributes to the 9 bits of information selected to make up my reality. Hold on though, it gets even juicier. Within both our subconscious and unconscious minds are emotionally charged brain cells that may have hurt, rage, shame, guilt, fear, or anger attached. These emotionally charged brain cells will distort and defile our perception. Our reality, then, may not at all accurately represent the actuality around us. Whoa, that's a lot to take in. So, making this as simple as possible, only 2 options shape my reality. If I have emotionally charged brain cells firing, some form of fear or hostility are active in me. And whenever fear or hostility are present, it's a sign I am believing a lie. I am operating on corrupt, stored data from the past. As a result, the reality generated in my 9-bit mind will be distorted. If fear was resonating, my reality will appear to me as threatening. If hostility was resonated in my brain cells, my reality will appear irritating. The other option is that I am in touch with my being, in receiving guidance from my essence as love. In this case, a different reality will form in my mind, a loving reality that has an entirely different experience of the world, one that perceives with compassion and clarity. I'd now like to introduce another critical building block, the cycle of insanity. It starts when we deny. Something painful or traumatic happens that is more than we can process at the moment. So we suppress that painful content to an unconscious level, beneath the veil of awareness. When this happens for the first time, it happens only once. There is a second form of denial, however, that we can repeat over and over again. Because I don't want to connect with or see this painful content, I will continue to deny that it ever happened. When I think, speak, or act as if someone or something outside of me is responsible for what is happening inside of me. This form of denial can happen over and over again, and every time I deny in this way, I drive the content further down into the unconscious. Every time I do this, I also add more emotional energy to that content, which gives it even more power. As if this isn't enough to deal with, we also have, stored in our DNA, multi-generational content from our entire bloodlines. There is considerable evidence that much of the content in our unconscious memory is from our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, and so forth. We also carry traces of the unresolved emotional upset from earlier generations, and with the proper trigger, these cells can also be resonated. Whenever we deny responsibility for any of this content beneath the veil, it is called dissociation. We have dissociated from it and don't want to claim it as our own. The emotionally charged content, however, then projects an image into our 9-bit mind, creating our reality. A reality that will certainly be a distorted perception based on corrupt data from the past. Finally, since all of this happens unconsciously, we blame others as the cause for my painful perceptions today, here and now, never realizing that the real cause lies within me, the dissociated and emotionally charged content from my past and the past of all my generations. So now, with these basic building blocks under our belt, let's take a look at the ancient Aramaic process of forgiveness. The first thing to realize is that whenever hostility or fear are present, it's time to forgive my reality. If we are upset, the cycle of insanity is operating. There is another key insight to know. When hostility and fear are present, we also have a goal that is not being fulfilled. There is something I wanted to achieve, or I wanted someone else to do for me, that is not being fulfilled. So let's walk through this with an example from my life. What I'm aware of in my experience is that I'm angry at my boss because he always criticizes my work. First, I need to realize and admit to myself that I'm upset. If I then ask myself, what goal do I have for my boss that's not being fulfilled? I realize that I do have a goal for him. I want him to acknowledge and appreciate my work. This goal, then, resonates brain cells in my unconscious and actually selects the limited 9 bits of information that will be used to form my perceptions. Difficult as it may seem to grasp, this may include content from our own lives or dissociated content from the lives of our ancestors. Remember, our entire genetic structure holds multi-generational content from our bloodlines on both sides. The resonated brain cells from this pool of emotionally charged, dissociated, multi-generational content projects into our minds a distorted reality, a distorted perception. Once we now have this reality in our mind, we broadcast a high energy wave out into the world that resonates and attracts someone to act out the reality we hold. I actually attract and resonate my boss to not acknowledge and appreciate the work I do. And because I'm completely unaware of this whole process going on inside of me, I am unconsciously creating the situation that I don't want. Surprising as it may seem, the driver for this whole process of perception is my goal. In this case, my goal to have my boss acknowledge and appreciate my work. Wow, that's a lot to digest here as well. Now that I'm aware enough to realize A, that I'm upset, and B, that I have a goal that is not being fulfilled, I can now take the steps to prepare to forgive. The first is to choose to love truth. This is fundamental. I have to be willing to see what I've been hiding from myself, to see the situation clearly and without the distortions caused by my hostility and fear. Truth can set us free if we choose to love truth enough to see it clearly. This is the first step to take in our mind. Next is the willingness to embrace generational content and to go through the symptoms of healing. It can be challenging to accept that my fear, sadness, grief, upset, or anger may actually be something inherited from my parents, great-grandparents, or earlier generations. There is an increasing amount of research that suggests that the thoughts, feelings, and memories of our ancestors are actually encoded in our own DNA. We must be willing to be open to healing not only ourselves, but our whole ancestral lineage. It's a big task. The second point is the willingness to go through the symptoms of healing. Whatever trauma or event originally drove this energy into our system came with symptoms: pain, confusion, nausea, rigidity, etc. As this energy leaves our system, the same types of symptoms are likely to occur. On a physical level, this could be any physical symptom you've ever had and low energy. On a mental level, it could be any negative thought you've ever had in confusion. On an emotional level, it could be any negative feelings you've ever had and depression. Healing takes courage because this very likely won't feel good as you're going through the process. Willingness, though, is the cosmic grease that allows the whole process to continue. Next is to bring love, conscious, active, and present. Love itself is the great healing energy that can dissolve any blocked energy, confusion, or difficulty. A key part of this process is to have love conscious, active, and present in our minds. You can do this in whatever way works for you. Some people recall holding a newborn baby. Some by connecting with their favorite pet. For some, it happens by reconnecting with a safe place in nature. However you do it, it is important to have love conscious, active, and present in your mind. And finally, breathe. The most effective way to lock down energy and emotions is by holding the breath. Breathing, therefore, is the way to allow blocked energy to flow and leave our systems. Breathing deeply and fully as we move forward will be very important. We are now ready for the next step of forgiveness. To cancel the goal. Again, let's use the example with my boss who criticizes my work. You will remember I discovered that I did have a goal for him. I want him to acknowledge and appreciate my work. While this may not seem to make any sense at the moment, I actually cancel my goal for my boss to acknowledge and appreciate my work. I let go of that need. I don't care if he appreciates my work or not. When I do this, it stops resonating the unconscious dissociated brain cells from my past. And as a result, the projection from my unconscious emotionally charged brain cells collapses. When this happens, my perception, the reality in my mind, also collapses. I'm now left with a clean and open space in my mind, a clear altar. Doing this opens a pathway to see the dissociated content in my unconscious and expose it to love. We now have a chance to have a direct relationship with the unconscious rather than having our perceptions, our reality, shaped and driven by the corrupt data of the past. Finally, because I've canceled the goal, and the emotionally charged unconscious brain cells are no longer firing, there's another great benefit. The high-energy creative wave that resonates and attracts people and situations to us also collapses. This means we are no longer unconsciously creating. Canceling the goal collapses projection and perception. It collapses our fear or hostility-based reality that was triggered from the past. It leaves our mind in a clear and open space and opens a pathway so that we can come into direct contact with unconscious, emotionally charged material that we have hidden from ourselves for a very long time, possibly even for generations. Canceling the goal opens the space for direct perception and guidance from being. Wow, this is powerful stuff. Now that we have opened a pathway for a direct relationship with unconscious content from the past, we are ready for the next step, which is the core of the forgiveness process. First, we want to invite love to be present in our minds. In the ancient Aramaic, the term used was rukadukudsha. This is a feminine, elemental force in humans that breaks off the effect of errors and teaches us truth. It's a force for that which is proper for humans. It is also a super processor that can reach back through and heal all the generations. People today may call upon Jesus, the Holy Spirit, divine being, or whatever higher power for healing that resonates for you. As we invite love present, we want to ask this power to first incline me toward healing, to heal my denial and capacity to generate fear, hostility, or whatever upset we're having, to help me open a direct, conscious relationship with and remove the dissociated and projected parts of my mind, and finally, to restore me to love. It's critical to remember at this point to breathe. When difficult and long suppressed emotions come to the surface, our tendency is to stop breathing, to hold our breath. Holding our breath is the most common way to keep our emotions suppressed and keep the unconscious dynamics in our lives active. As we breathe and keep love present, we enter the healing process. When we do, it is common that you might experience the symptoms of healing, which can happen on any of three levels: physical, mental, and emotional. On a physical level, this could be any physical symptom you've ever had in the past and low energy. On a mental level, this could be any negative thought you've ever had and confusion. On an emotional level, this could be any negative feelings you've ever had and depression. The core of the forgiveness process is actually quite simple. When you bring old suppressed fear and hostility into consciousness in the presence of love, it simply dissolves the old energetic content of anger, fear, and upset. If you now watch the three emotionally charged unconscious brain cells in our diagram, you'll see that the emotional charge dissipates. A memory or part of a memory that was unconscious becomes available to us. It moves to the unconscious, where we can easily access it. And finally, the veil covering our unconsciousness moves down slightly. We become more fully conscious and less driven by repressed emotions. Let's revisit the example of my boss who was critical of my work. Remember, I canceled the goal for him to acknowledge and appreciate my work. When I did that, it stopped those unconscious brain cells from resonating. This collapsed the projection in my mind, the reality I was holding about my boss, leaving my conscious mind clear and open. With love present, I now have an open pathway through the veil into my unconscious repressed memories. What I noticed as I kept breathing is a memory with my father when I was 8 years old. My father was a skilled carpenter and a perfectionist. I remember one time I made a hot plate for my mother. It was my pride and joy, my masterpiece, the best I could manage as an 8-year-old. When I presented it to my father, he smiled a bit, paused a moment, and then proceeded to point out all the things that were wrong with my hot plate. At that moment, I was both sad and angry that I could never please my father and that it seemed he was always critical of me. Staying conscious, keeping love present, and breathing, I was able to let go of this long-held emotional energy of anger and sadness that had been trapped in my system. I also realized that I had been projecting this anger and sadness onto my image of my boss. He was exactly like my father. No wonder. With these unresolved, unconscious dynamics, I couldn't possibly see him any other way. Having released this emotion, I am now in a position to make another choice. To form a truly loving goal. Without this suppressed emotion, I am much more able to stay centered and present in my true nature, my being as love. From this perspective, I can ask with clear vision, what's the core issue here? What's a loving goal I can set toward my object of attention? In this case, my boss. As always, it's good to breathe. In this case, to stay centered in love with an open and receptive mind. Very soon, a new goal will develop in my loving mind. It will be different from my earlier goal, where I wanted my boss to acknowledge and appreciate my work. The earlier goal was framed with when my mind was in a state of unconscious anger and sadness. Notice in this state, I was looking to get something from my boss, for him to do something, for him to be different, to change somehow. With this new loving goal, I'm looking to see what I can offer to my boss, how I can be different. In this case, as I give, I receive the gift of the original. When I offer something from a state of love, it first resonates in my system. I get the benefit of a loving, kind, or generous vibration in my energy system. So when I ask myself, what's a loving goal I can set toward my boss, I realize in the past I had been resisting hearing whatever he was trying to tell me. I had been always trying to force my own opinions and ideas and not really listening to what he had to say. Thus, my loving goal toward my boss is, I will be open and willing to understand exactly what he is telling me and do my best to support him succeeding. This completely shifts my perception of my boss, the reality I've been holding of him in my mind. Instead of upset and frustration with him, I'm now open to having a more loving, peaceful, and cooperative experience. The high energy wave, creative wave that resonates and attracts situations, peoples, and reactions in my life has also shifted. The wave is now resonating with love. I am now consciously creating from a mind of love, rather than unconsciously creating from anger and sadness. While my boss may not recognize exactly what is different, there will be a change. He will be more relaxed because he instinctively senses that my anger has dissolved and been replaced with a more open and willing mindset. And happily, I can return to my own newborn state of love with the excitement, joy, and enthusiasm that we all had as very young children. In this presentation, I've outlined the steps used in the Reality Management Worksheet. This is a powerful tool for true forgiveness, not to simply let somebody off the hook or pardon them for what they've done, but to genuinely forgive, according to the ancient Aramaic tradition, to release the suppressed and destructive energies within ourselves that have been unconsciously attracting negative and painful conditions into our lives over and over again. With this tool, we are free to heal ourselves and return to our native state of love 24/7, 365. For a free download of the Reality Management Worksheet, and for many more resources about the ancient Aramaic process of forgiveness, Dr. Ryce has an extensive website with tons of free information, tools, and examples, available at www.whyagain.org. Michael and his wife Jeannie also have a live radio show, Monday through Friday, 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can just listen, or you can call in, ask a question, and speak with Michael directly. It's such a great resource for learning and continued support. I encourage you to try this powerful process in your life. The results can be truly extraordinary. Thanks for listening.